Something strange happened about a month ago when I was on a flight to Italy from Michigan. The boarding process, the flight crews, the passengers, and pretty much everything seemed normal on that day. I travel quite often due to my husband's business. We've been married for 20 years, but he still makes me follow him everywhere he goes. On this day, I was traveling alone. I had to drop something off for my daughter at her dorm, and so my husband had to leave first. We made a stop in Dallas, and the layover was about 4 hours. Then we took the flight to Rome, Italy, and we were to fly for about 10 hours straight. That's the leg of the journey I'll be discussing here. I felt quite tired as soon as I boarded the airplane. The day before the flight, I had to drive 8 hours round trip from home to my daughter's and then back to my home again. I didn't sleep much on that day and couldn't get much sleep on the flight before the layover either. I was in first class and seated next to the window. With no one to bother me in my little pod, I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the headrest. I woke up about an hour later when they were serving in-flight meals. I thought about skipping the meal and getting more sleep, but my stomach wouldn't let me. Some 40 minutes later, and with my stomach full, my eyes shut on their own and I was in dreamland once more. I don't know how much longer I may have slept, but I woke up again from the noises inside the first class cabin. They were serving meals again. I was still full and there was still daylight outside. It didn't make sense that they were serving meals again. So I checked my watch and to my surprise, only about an hour had passed. That didn't make any sense. I slept at least an hour on each of my 2 naps and spent some 40 minutes to finish the meal. By that point, at least 3 hours should have passed. I called for the flight attendant and asked her why they were serving meals again. Her answer left me speechless as she said, "Are you sure it wasn't a meal from the previous flight? This is the first meal we're serving, ma'am." It took me a moment to recover from that, but soon after I asked her again, "Really? So you didn't serve meals about an hour prior?" She smiled and responded, "Yes, I'm positive." So I just told her thanks and that I didn't want to eat. Then she left. Nothing about the conversation I had made any sense. For argument's sake, let's say that the flight attendant is correct and they didn't serve any meals. Let's also accept that only an hour had passed since boarding the plane. But what about my full stomach? How do you explain that? I've had a cup of coffee in the morning but no breakfast. The flight to Dallas did serve meals, but I didn't feel like eating at the time. I bought a small bag of chips during the 4-hour layover, and that was all that I had to eat for the day. Aside from the imaginary meal I had on this airplane, I've had nothing that should make my stomach feel full. As you might imagine, I didn't want to sleep after that. I felt paranoid that I might wake up to another meal, and so I tried to stay awake, but to no avail. I was too tired from the lack of sleep and ended up drifting to slumber once again. I woke up again sometime thereafter and immediately lamented falling asleep. The flight crews were serving meals again and it was still very bright outside. I feared checking the time in that moment, but I had no choice. I flicked my wrist and gazed at my watch. To my dismay, I've been on board the airplane for just a little over an hour. The period of time in which lunch is served was looping in my reality. My stomach was also consistent with the time looping theory. I wasn't full anymore. I wasn't hungry at the time, but I definitely wasn't full. When the flight attendant came by, I asked her if the meal they were serving was the first of the flight. She said yes, I said thanks, and that cemented that something was wrong. I was still a bit sleepy, but this time I was determined to stay awake for the rest of the flight. I had the TV turned on, completed some puzzles, and also struck up a conversation with a fellow passenger in the center aisle. One of the pods was unoccupied and a nice lady was seated next to that. Her privacy screen was lowered at the time, so I figured she'd make the perfect conversation partner to help me burn an hour or 2. I managed to stay awake for the rest of the flight, and in much part thanks to the nice lady in the center aisle. I arrived in Rome safely, and time has stopped looping, as evidenced by me sending you this email. I told my husband about the happenings on the airplane. Predictably, he tells me I must be mistaken, but I haven't. How could anyone mistake napping twice on a flight and being offered 3 meals in a span of 1 hour? Of course, to me, the whole thing happened in a span of 4 hours, although admittedly, my watch did say otherwise. Strange, I know, but it happened. I know it did. When I woke up this morning, I thought I was still asleep and dreaming. You see, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment for the insane rent of $2,500 a month. That's the going rate for an average apartment in Upper East Side Manhattan, New York. I share the apartment with my girlfriend Gina, and we split the rent 50-50. I work for a design firm, I don't own a car, I've got 2 cats and a dog, and I suppose I have a fairly high income for someone of my age. That about describes who I am. I'm just a regular Joe who's rather geeky, loves Star Trek, and I love playing video games when my girlfriend's not around. Yeah, I think that about spells the plain old Desmond. The thing is though, I woke up this morning in a 2-story house in Connecticut. I was in a large bedroom, and the bed looked really fancy as opposed to the IKEA bed I had purchased for my bedroom. I honestly thought that I was dreaming. As dumb as it may sound to you, I actually tried to go back to sleep in what I thought was a dream. As if that would somehow wake me up in my own bed. It didn't, of course. I realized in less than a minute after trying to fall back asleep that I wasn't dreaming at all. I thought to myself, holy crap, did I cheat on Gina? And whose house is this? I stepped out of the bedroom and saw that I was on the 2nd floor. That's when I heard a woman talking on the phone downstairs. Oh no, that must be the woman whom I've slept with last night, I thought. I was in my boxers and shirt, so I went back to the bedroom to grab my clothes, only I didn't see my clothes on the floor or anywhere else in the bedroom. I had to go downstairs, and so I stepped into the walk-in closet where I found a bunch of suits, dress shirts, and neckties. I knew for sure the woman downstairs was cheating on her husband, and that was the guy she was doing the cheating with. In any event, there were some jeans and shirts as well. They were about my size, so I put them on and headed downstairs. The woman was still on the phone, but she walked toward me when I walked into the kitchen. Then she kissed me on the mouth. I couldn't believe whom I was seeing. This was Allison, my girlfriend from college. I was going to say something, but then she signaled with her finger for me to stay quiet. I was so sure that I must have gotten drunk the previous night, met up with Allison somehow, and now we are in an adulterous relationship. The person on the other line must be her husband. I sat at the table, waiting for her to finish up the phone conversation. She casually walked toward the island in the middle of the kitchen, grabbed a sandwich that was already made, and placed it on the table on a dish. She gestured for me to eat it and gave me the most loving smile I had ever witnessed. I felt guilty, ashamed, and regretful. I loved Gina with all my heart. I couldn't understand how I could have done this to her. I bit into the sandwich and leaned against the bench I was seated on. My line of sight had changed slightly to the right, and that's when I saw a picture of me and Allison on the wall. I nearly spit out the sandwich in my mouth because it was our wedding photo. I got up and ran toward the photo on the wall. I was now certain that it was me in the photograph. Allison was still busy on the phone, and so I walked toward the living room to search for more clues. There were more pictures of me and Allison. We looked happy. The photos seemed recent, meaning we must have gotten married in the last year or so. I was seeing all the evidence of this actually being a reality, but I still couldn't believe it. I must have looked like I had seen a ghost, because that's exactly what Allison said to me when she was done with the phone call. She quickly grabbed her handbag and the key fob for the car. She came to me and said, "Don't forget, we have lunch later. Oh, and also, you told me to remind you about the Hanson project. You said you needed more time for that and that you have to speak to the contractors. Get it done, babe. I'll see you later." Then she gave me a kiss and stepped out of the house. I stood in the middle of the living room, dazed and confused. I searched around the house for more clues to this life, and I was able to find traces of my life everywhere. The photos, my clothes, the shoes fit me perfectly, and my office was set up exactly the way I always hoped to have it designed one day. Even my PlayStation 4 had nearly the exact library of games I had in my, what I guess I should call my former life. I tried to find out what Gina was up to in this life. It turns out she lives in Manhattan in this life as well, and she has another boyfriend that she's splitting her rent with. In her life, I was replaced with some other guy. As for me, I'm still trying to pick up the pieces in this life. Allison being an ex, that is an ex in my other life, it helps with the whole getting to know you again process. But work is a little different. I work freelance now. As it turns out, I've got different set of clients to please and have to deal with bigger projects. It seems like the only major change in my life has been marrying Allison. Other than that, my profession is still in my former field. I've still got a complete collection of Star Trek in Blu-ray, and according to Allison, I still play way too much video games. I make it sound like all is great, but they really are not. I miss Gina terribly. I also miss my dog, cats, and even my apartment. I mean no offense to the folks in Connecticut, but I hate this place. It's so flat and empty, not to mention you have to drive everywhere. I remember the relationship I had with Gina in my other life. I proposed to her right after I finished my master's degree, and she said yes. We had problems though. I wanted to live in the city, but Gina wanted to settle down in Connecticut. This is the place where she was born and raised. She wanted to be here. I said to her that we both should make some compromises. I suggested for us to live in the city for 5 years and to move to Connecticut when we are ready to have kids. But Gina wanted to try for a baby in a year or less, and that's where everything fell apart. So how does this work? Did the other me decide that it was worth staying with Gina? If so, where is that other me? What happened to him? I also see the possibility of having dreamt of my other life. But I can't make sense of that theory. My other life feels too real, and more importantly, too lengthy to be a dream. How could you possibly dream about a 29 years of life rich with detail during an overnight dream? That's at most 8 hours only. I sleep on average about 7 hours. You can't possibly dream half a lifetime in that amount of time, but can you? I've read somewhere that time flows differently in our dreams and that dreams are portals to different realities. Some say that you can live a lifetime in your dream and not remember any of that when you wake up. How much truth can exist in such statement? I would have said 0 before all these, but I'm not so sure anymore. I can't talk about this to anyone because they'll think I'm crazy. To be honest, I wouldn't blame them if they did. I mean, I find myself wondering about the same thing every couple of hours. I don't know what's real and what isn't. I just wish this was a nightmare and I could wake up next to Gina the next time morning comes.